Can you hear me now? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Thank you for joining us for our information security seminar titled Taiwan's Community-Driven Response to Information Threats, held in collaboration with the Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technology, also known as DSET, the Safer Internet Association, and the Japan Fact Check Center. We're delighted to have you here. You can consult the event's webpage, which contains all the details about today's program, by scanning the QR provided to you at the reception. Before we begin, I'd like to go over 3 important reminders. This event will be conducted in English and Japanese, with simultaneous interpretation available. So if needed, you can borrow a receiver from the table just outside the entrance. Channel 1 is Japanese and channel 2 is English. If you have any questions for our speakers, you can submit them through the QR code, which was also provided to you at the reception. We will be accepting questions until 3:10 p.m. Finally, if you share pictures of today's event on social media or similar platforms, we kindly ask you for your consideration in protecting the privacy of other participants. Now, let us start with the event. I would like to start with opening remarks from Admiral Kazuya Yamamoto, Director of the Strategy and Deterrence Program at Sasakawa Peace Foundation.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Admiral Yamamoto, Director of the Strategy and Deterrence of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. On behalf of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, I am honored to welcome you to today's symposium, co-hosted with the Research Institute for Democracy, Society, and Emerging Technology, and the Safer Internet Association Japan Fact Check Center. This event brings together experts from Taiwan and Japan to explore a challenge that affects democracies around the world, the increasing spread of the disinformation. As the digital technologies evolved, so do that tactics used to manipulate public opinion and distort facts. Addressing these complex issues calls for a range of responses, including public awareness and coordination among governments, civil society, and platforms. Taiwan, which has sustained external information manipulation, offers valuable examples in how multi-sector collaboration through fact-checking, digital literacy, and rapid response can help maintain a not only healthy information environment, democratic society, and also quality of life for citizens. Today's speakers from Taiwan will share insight into current approach and experience in addressing these challenges. And we will also hear reflections on how emerging technologies such as AI and influencing the information landscape. From Japan, we will hear about the current landscape of disinformation and initiatives led by our Sasakawa Peace Foundation to raise awareness on the issue. I would like to extend my sincere thanks to our distinguished guests from DSET, the Taiwan Information Environment Research Center, and the Japan Fact Check Center and Safer Internet Association. We deeply appreciate the time and expertise each of today's speakers will contribute to the important conversations, and we are grateful for the opportunity to learn from your insight and experience. Again, thank you all for joining us. I hope this symposium will inspire meaningful dialogue and further collaborations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Admiral Yamamoto. Now, I would like to invite on stage Dr. Jeremy Zhu Chen-Zhang for his opening remarks. He's the CEO and Director of Economic Security Research at Taiwan's DSET.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeremy Chan, CEO of DSET. It's really a great honor to be invited by Sasakawa Peace Foundation and jointly have this kind of critical event with SIA, JFC, and IORG here to discussing about one of the most critical issues that we are currently encountering there in Taiwan, which is daily defending our information environment and confronting the PRC's cognitive warfare every day, and to exchange kind of opinion, compare the notes with our Japanese counterpart here in Tokyo. Firstly, because it's really the first time that we have this kind of a joint event with Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So most of you maybe still have no idea about what DSET is. So I'm just briefly introduce about ourselves. And because we have just our brochure and we put that outside. So for folks, if you're interested in our research institute, please feel free to get this brochure. And we are, of course, welcoming to exchange further opinion with us. So DSET is a national think tank created in the end of 2023. So we are the youngest national think tank created by the Taiwanese government, the Taiwan National Science and Technology Council, in the end of the year of 2023. So we're just 1.5 years, so still very young, but we are a think tank that's specifically focusing on the technology issue that related to techno-geopolitics. So you might wonder why, at the current moment, Taiwanese government created this kind of national think tank. But it's not really hard to understand why we've been created and what kind of mission we are currently doing. Since the escalation of U.S.-China competition on the technology hegemony in the Trump 1.0 era, so everybody has noticed about the importance of the semiconductor industry. And after the pandemic, after the shortage of semiconductor chips, and not only Japan, but also the United States and European countries has just noticed about the importance of the semiconductors. And we are about just entering into the era of AI. And so the semiconductors has been seen as one of the most critical components for the future, not for the future of technology, but also for the future of human civilization. And we believe that this kind of a critical technology should be keeping dominated by the like-minded countries who are still, pursuing the democratic and freedom way of human beings' life. So this is one of our mission, but we are also dealing with all the, related issues that in terms of energy security, the national defense security. We've been witnessing what Ukraine has been fighting with Russia for the past 2.5 years by leveraging the drone technology. So we're interested in this part as well. We know Taiwan may be the next frontier of defending the democratic values and from the attack of the authoritarian regime. So every day what we've been doing now is we are defending ourselves from the cyber attacks. We're defending ourselves from the cognitive warfare, and we're also defending our submarine cables. So this is our daily work. And so we are trying to leverage in whatever the resources we have, but we also want to have this kind of dialogue, direct dialogue with our like-minded countries, especially Japan, because finally TSMC is here in Japan. So we're looking forward to this kind of collaboration in terms of pushing forward to this kind of national security and economic security collaboration. So today, I think this is one of the most critical topics for Japan and Taiwan to jointly sitting together for further discussion and further information exchange, as well as the solution finding process. It's very honored to be speaking here and looking forward to more of the discussion happen later in this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. So now we would like to start with today's main content. We would like to welcome on stage Dr. Kai Soon Huang, Research Fellow and Director of the Democratic Governance Program at DSET. It will be presenting Flooding the Information Pipeline. Please.
So good afternoon, and thank you very much for being here. So before I start my presentation, I just want to ask a very simple question. Is there such a thing as disinformation, or is it just information someone, such as the government, doesn't like, and therefore should be protected as free speech? And that's the debate which is playing out around the world. But in Taiwan, this debate is no longer theoretical. We are seeing firsthand how the information space is being manipulated by outside forces. So information becomes shaped, filtered, and sometimes weaponized. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So this presentation is going to look at how foreign information manipulation and interference, FIMI, and how it moves across platforms, and how it takes root in online narratives, and now, increasingly, how it runs through AI systems. So my goal today is rather straightforward. It's really just to make sense of the patterns we are seeing and ask what democracies like Taiwan can do about it. So before we start, just let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Kai-Sheng Huang, and I'm the director of the Democratic Governance Program at DSET in Taiwan. And my research have revolved around two specific areas. One is AI and geopolitics, specifically how democracies respond to the rise of authoritarian technologies. The other is information security, including FIMI and data protection. So this talk has 4 parts. First, we will start with platforms. We will discuss how they become a key channel for foreign information influence in Taiwan, and what the data tell us about their political effects. Second, we will look at how online narrative can spill over into the real world. Third, we turn to AI. We will see how authoritarian countries are using large language models, such as DeepSeek, not just to censor content, but to shape what machines learn and deliver. And finally, if the time allows, I will share what is happening in Europe, especially why the EU is paying attention to FIMI and how they are reframing the issue and what Taiwan's experience can contribute. So that's the path of my presentation today. We will start from platforms to protest, to AI systems, and finally to global responses. So let me just begin with part 1, where this all starts, the platforms. So according to the Taiwan Communication Survey in 2024, about 60% of junior high students use TikTok. And for elementary school students, the number is 44%, which means a platform such like TikTok is becoming what we call habit-forming infrastructure, which means the more you see it, the more it becomes your default source of information and entertainment, even news. But the content you see isn't really neutral. It's largely driven by algorithms. And those algorithms are designed to maximize engagement rather than to inform. That means you don't really get a balanced view. Over time, this creates a very specific pattern of exposure. Some messages are repeated and over again, and others just quietly disappear. And it all starts, and because of that kind of a pattern, it starts to reshape how young people in Taiwan understand society, democracy, and national identity. So what does this all mean? This means China doesn't really need to control what young people in Taiwan think. It just needs to shape the environment where they grow up. And the algorithm will do the rest. And that's China's agenda setting at scale, very subtle, systemic, and deeply effective. So we have talked about how widely TikTok is used in Taiwan, but what is it actually doing to public opinion? So according to Doublethink Lab and IORG, two of Taiwan's very leading non-governmental research organizations, they find a very clear pattern. The more someone uses TikTok, the more likely their political attitude begins to shift. So TikTok-heavy users are more likely, first, to feel dissatisfied with Taiwan's democracy. Second, they are more likely to support close ties with China. Third, they are more likely to express anti-American sentiment. And fourth, they are more likely to accept China's framing of national identity. And this of course doesn't mean these platforms are going to turn everyone into a political mouthpiece overnight. But here's the thing, it doesn't have to be. The shift or the change is rather slow and it's emotional. It is happening through content that doesn't even look political. So we have dance videos, we have street interviews, and we have a lot of interesting memes. And this is the medium, and it's very powerful. So when we talk about platforms as a vector of influence, we are really talking about what it's becoming normalized and how it nudges young people toward a very specific worldview. And that's the real power of algorithm, not to shout, but to whisper day after day. So how has Taiwan responded to this so far? The government has taken some steps. Since 2019, TikTok has been banned on government devices. But here is the problem. For the general public, TikTok is still fully accessible. And that's because blocking a popular app, especially during elections, could easily trigger political backlash, and it could be seen as a censorship. And all that leads to a very difficult spot for Taiwan. On paper, TikTok is recognized as a security risk, but in practice, it still dominates Taiwan's digital space, especially among young users. So this brings us a core dilemma. Taiwan cannot fully regulate platforms without compromising its democratic values. But doing nothing, it means sitting ground in the information space. So that's part one. So let me just share three quick takeaways. First, TikTok is now a daily habit for many young people in Taiwan, and that gives the platform real power to shape what they care about and how they see the world. Second, the algorithm isn't neutral. Over time, this can shift how people think about democracy, identity, and Taiwan's future. Third, Taiwan's democratic values make it very hard to regulate this kind of influence. If the government steps in too aggressively, it risks violating free speech. But if it holds back, it risks losing control of the information space. So in our report, we just want to argue this isn't really just a disinformation problem. It's about how a platform itself becomes a strategic tool of influence embedded in daily life, but carrying long-term consequences. So that's part one. So far we have looked at how foreign influence spread through platforms, but that's just the starting point. In part two, we move to the real world. In Taiwan, the first line of defense against foreign information manipulation isn't really the government. It is the civil society. And this makes Taiwan very different. While many countries still rely on top-down responses, Taiwan's approach is bottom-up, which means its approach is decentralized, fast, and community-driven. And it generally works across three layers. First, media literacy. So we have NGOs such as Fake News Cleaner to help older adults build digital skills. And they train volunteers to sit down with seniors and teach them how to spot misleading content. Second, fact-checking. The Taiwan Fact Check Center is internationally certified, and platforms such as MyGoPen and Cofax run live bots, so people can check suspicious messages very quickly and easily. And finally, detection and analysis. And this is more like the behind-the-scene layer. So we have groups such as Doublethink Lab, IORG, and Team T5. And in general, they try to track how influence operation move, especially through networks, campaigns, and patterns. So to conclude, instead of one central agency calling the shots, you have a network of actors and each playing a part. And basically, that's Taiwan's strength. Not a single line of defense, but a web of it. But there are some recent events sort of push me to think if this community-driven model enough. Some recent trend in FIMI, for example, FIMI isn't really just about online influence anymore. We are really starting to see it spill over into the real world. So let me just give you a very quick example from the UK. So in 2023, a false claim started circulating online in a town called Southport. The story accused an illegal immigrant of committing a serious offense. In just 24 hours, it generated over 30,000 posts from more than 18,000 accounts on X. Then far-right influencers picked it up and pushed it very hard. Then violence broke in the streets. And there is a strong suspicion from the police authority that foreign actors helped seed the narrative in the first place. So what does that mean for Taiwan? It means this kind of offline escalation isn't really just a distant scenario. It's a real risk. So now let's look at a similar case from Taiwan. In November 2023, a post went viral on Dcard, which is a local platform rather popular among Taiwanese students. It claimed bringing Indian migrant workers would turn Taiwan into a sexual assault island. And the post spread very, very fast. And within just a few days, the online panic became a real protest. People hit the streets, targeting the government's labor policy. And it entered mainstream discussion almost immediately. And it was the language, and the reason why we find this operation very suspicious is that because we find the language rather problematic. Some posts use phrases very common in China, but very, very rarely used in Taiwanese Mandarin. So that's usually a sign that something may have been seeded or amplified externally. Then Chinese media picked up the story, reported as grassroots anger from Taiwanese netizens. And that gives the narrative even more legitimacy and more fuel. So compared to the UK, I think Taiwan faces a different kind of risk when it comes to offline escalation, and that risk comes from inside the system for 3 reasons. First, local infrastructure. Taiwan has a dense web of actors that shape public opinion every day. Here I'm talking about media outlets, influencers, and civic associations. And the problem, some of the actors often unintentionally amplify messages that align with FIMI narratives. So in this sense, influence doesn't need to be imported. It's already there. There is a built-in system that can carry online manipulation into political disruption. These are not anonymous foreign accounts. These are Taiwanese voices. They sound very familiar because they speak to local concern. And in general, the narrative they push, they lean toward war anxiety, anti-American framing, and calls for unification. And because these messages feel very local, they also feel very legitimate. And that makes this message very, very powerful and very difficult for the government to challenge it. So for this slide, I think I just want to convey the idea I want to deliver is that the bottom line is very clear. Taiwan doesn't really need to import the Spark. It already holds the Tinder. So to conclude part two, first, the general idea is that FIMI isn't just about online influence anymore. It's turning into a strategic tool, basically target the democratic system from the inside out. So let me just give you 3 key takeaways. First, civil society in Taiwan is doing most of the work against FIMI. They are leading the response. But here, there are also some limitations, as another speaker will share with you later, because it doesn't really have enough institutional resources. Second, we are already seeing offline escalation. So disinformation isn't just about how to distort opinion. It starts to push people into the streets. Finally, Taiwan's biggest weakness isn't really just coming from the outside. It's already built in the domestic information system. There are local actors picking up and repeating FIMI narratives, and on many occasions, aligned with geopolitical opponents. So what we are left now is really just a volatile system of information in Taiwan. So let's move to part 3. So let's turn to the different kind of change or development in FIMI. So in part 3, I will focus on how AI tools are making FIMI faster, more difficult to detect, and more deeply embedded in the system that produce knowledge in the first place. So if you go online and search for baby peacock, chances are the top results won't be real photos. They will be AI-generated images. It might seem harmless, but this all points to a very big problem. More and more of the content we see online, including text, images, even videos, is being produced by AI. And here is the real concern. That AI-generated content is now feeding back into the system. It circulates on platforms. It gets scraped as training data, and it ends up training the next generations of models. So what does that mean? It means the system starts to reinforce its own errors, and also multiply. So we are not just really dealing with more content. Because of AI, we are now dealing with content that train itself in the loop. So now let's turn to how authoritarian countries use AI. In these systems, censorship isn't really added after the fact. It's built in from the start. China, for example, AI models there are trained on data that's already been filtered and sanitized by the government. As you can see from the left side, the rules are rather clear. AI-generative content must never challenge what they call core socialist values. That means not criticizing the government, not challenging national unity, and nothing that could damage national security or harm China's image. So in this sense, the censorship isn't just about what they cannot say. It's about what the model is never allowed to learn. 1 minute. Okay. So instead of responding with biased output, these models are designed to avoid certain topic altogether. So now let's look at another growing risk. Even democratic system can be compromised, and we described it as democratic AI infected. Here is how it happens. AI tool can power foreign information operation. So in the doppelganger campaign, for example, AI was used to generate fake accounts at scale, including fraudulent news article and fake social media posts. Because we are running out of time, so I'm gonna move to the next slide very quickly. So to conclude, let me just give you 3 takeaways. No. here. Just to give you 3 key takeaways for part 3. So first, authoritarian AI is censorship by design, by default. Second, even democratic AI is at risk. We have seen how fake content can slip into training data. And third, this kind of risk is scale. Because when AI's tools spread, so does the influence of the narrative they carry within the data set and the model they export. So that's the end. I'll just stop here and thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Now, I would like to welcome Mr. Zhu Haoyou, co-director of the Taiwan Information Environment Research Center, or IORG. It will be presenting Exposing Information Manipulation and Authoritarian Influence, Safeguarding Authentic Political Discourse and Election Integrity.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Zhi Hao. I'm from IORG. Thank you for having us. IORG started in 2019, and we are a group of Taiwanese data engineers and social scientists using data and technology to detect online information environment, manipulation, and also offline influence activities. And I am not a great speaker, and I often look at data sets and data sheets, so I apologize if you find this too technical. But here's my email. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email me. This is hi@iorg.tw. Okay. So IORG conducts our research activities in the context of PRC hybrid threats against Taiwan, my country. Some of the aspects you are very familiar with, like military intimidation, economic coercion, some other aspects, including cyber attacks, infiltration, and transnational repression. In our opinion, information manipulation amplifies the effect of each of these threats against my society, my country, on different levels. Right? On the sovereignty level, threatens Taiwan's self-defense and independence. On the institutional level, threatens people's trust on those institutions. On the industry and on the individual level, threatens every Taiwanese citizens that speaks Mandarin and other languages as well. So we look at the centerpiece of this threat model, which is information manipulation. In our sort of hypothesis, PRC, the People's Republic of China, or China in short, their activities in Taiwan are trying to build a worldview for Taiwanese readers or Mandarin language readers in every different countries in the world, including Japan and the US and Canada and other countries. Right? These information manipulation activities are trying to build a worldview in the reader's mind that benefits China ultimately. So how do they do that? Because we don't look at every country in the world, we look at Taiwan. So we hypothesize this 5-step strategy, right? We're all very familiar with the centerpieces of this 5-step plan, which is to amplify and to censor, right? Kai-Shen talks about how online trolls, these fake accounts, these influencers on TikTok amplifies these narratives. But what happens before that, right? We're also interested in that. So in Taiwan, we can see already some signs of, PRC infiltration into our societies, for example. That gives them more control to actual Taiwanese people in Taiwanese society. And it gives them also the capacity to follow Taiwanese local affairs, right? To tightly follow what's really hot, what are people discussing in Taiwan in order to insert and influence. And then to instigate, right? To instigate sort of discord, to instigate disagreement in Taiwan's information environment. To highlight the negativity of our society and to make people angry about each other, basically, and about the government. And this, they get a destabilized netizen, right? The internet online discourse is destabilized. Emotion are heightened in our society, and it gives them more power, right? It gives our adversary more power. And then it is to amplify and censor the to amplify the narratives, and also to censor the information that the PRC doesn't like, right? Before, the PRC might not have so much power on censoring what Taiwanese people think, but now they have, as Kai-Shen mentioned rightfully, they have TikTok, they have Douyin, they have Xiaohongshu, and they have different control over different platforms, so that they're more able to censor Taiwanese speech. And finally, after these 3 steps, we have a lot more disruptions, we have a lot more disagreements in our society, and then it is up to the PRC propaganda to discredit Taiwanese democracy, say that Taiwanese democracy doesn't really work, right? And then the final stage, we call it liberate, because liberate is a communist term, for the officials of the PRC to come out and say, Taiwanese people are better off if you choose China, right? If you unite with China, and you will have a better life. So this is our hypothesis, and our work, our daily work, is to produce evidence to either prove or disprove this hypothesis, including using online tools, using data sets to detect all kinds of different malign activities. And the final goal of this strategy on the right, it is 2. One is to reduce the legitimacy of democracy, right? Democracy is not so great. Also, to reduce resistance to autocracy, right? Autocracy is not so bad. If you are able to insert these 2 ideas into your audience, your target audience, you are more likely to convince them to not trust their own democratic systems, for example, and also to choose, to at least be friendly to the autocrats, to the Chinese, and maybe to partner with them, or maybe to move to China in some more extreme cases. These are a lot more details, and thankfully we have a very big screen, but I'm not gonna go through all of this. Let's jump to what IRG does, right? IRG at the core is a data organization. Our operation starts with data collection, moves into mapping, extraction, and finally analysis, right? It's thanks to this kind of capacity that we have built since 2019, we're able to almost real time look at what the PRC is saying about Taiwan and potentially about other countries as well. For example, this is on the bottom right, these are some of the main propaganda points that the PRC was pushing about Japan last week. The top point was the public anxiety about the earthquakes and the end of Japan prediction that was very, I guess, viral, not just in Japan, but also in Taiwan, right? And on some smaller points that the Chinese propaganda would also emphasize, for example, how much loss was caused due to this earthquake anxiety. It was 560 billion Japanese yen. And then some other topics, like it was said that the government of Japan was to release what's called livestock feed rice due to the rice shortage to the Japanese people. Other points including, public trust towards the U.S. is record low here in Japan. Also smaller things like, Japanese men are buying child prostitutes in Laos, these are all propaganda points. Again, these are not me saying it. These are what the Chinese propaganda are saying. And of course, highlighting what Japan did during World War II, right? This is a major propaganda point for the Chinese. How do we detect these? First of all, we have to have data sets over not just the Taiwanese platform, not just the Western platforms, but the Chinese platforms as well. And also this would include Mandarin language media outlets, not just in Taiwan, in the PRC, but also in other countries, like in Malaysia, like in Japan. And then we have to map the data sets to their controller, right? Map the assets to the controller. For example, what are the accounts controlled by the PRC propaganda directly in Beijing? What are the accounts controlled by, let's say, their officers in Hong Kong, maybe? And what are the accounts controlled by Taiwanese media groups? We have to map all of these accounts to the controller. And then to extract information from these, not just text anymore, but nowadays videos and audios, right? Extracting the faces, extracting the speech, and detecting authenticity of these speech. And finally, presenting these evidence to our readers in Taiwan, but hopefully more and more to the readers here in Japan as well, about not just the narratives, right, but also their behavior online. How do they launder content? How are they coordinating with each other? And finally, hopefully to sort of try to reverse engineer what some of their internal logic is. Because what we can see as research organizations are outside, right? External things, open source things. But what really matters is what the internal logic of these operators are. We hope that by collecting enough data, we can reverse engineer. We can reverse engineer that internal logic, priorities, and hopefully limitations to give us better effective countermeasures. These are some of the more specific examples. For example, domestic shortages. Right now, Japan suffers a shortage of rice. Taiwan has been suffering shortages of different kinds of life essentials, such as electricity, eggs, sometimes water, medicine, and meat. And you see PRC propaganda amplifying each of these at different times, right? And our data sets are able to show us this trend, but also to highlight the narratives that the PRC propaganda is highlighting. Oh, sorry, wrong direction. But recently, more and more we're moving into video analysis, right? For example, this is an example of one of our earlier report trying to look at hidden influence on TikTok. So TikTok, people argue, is it a PRC platform? Is it not, right? But factually, it is controlled by ByteDance, but it argues itself as an international platform. So our job is to highlight the hidden authoritarian influence on that platform, right? How do we do that? So we compare a lot of different TikTok accounts. We compare a lot of different TikTok videos published by anonymous accounts versus the videos published by the Douyin accounts, which are controlled directly by PRC propaganda outlets. So if the content fits, if the content is really similar, then we are more confident that some of these TikTok accounts are controlled by the PRC propaganda machine. And we did find 147 TikTok accounts just during the 5 months of 2024. And we're able to identify the level of control the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, have over these accounts. And you can see these accounts on the left, right? Some of them are Chinese character. You can sort of read them. These are all anonymous accounts on the left, TikTok accounts. But comparing the videos that they publish versus the videos that are published by the PRC propaganda machine on Douyin, you see very clear relationship. And some of these, of course, all of these are controlled by the PRC on the right, but some of them are controlled by their, for example, Department of United Front Works, Department of Publicity. These are central communist agency that controls United Front Work, controls their external influence operations. Right. And another example, these are the 20 most highlighted Taiwanese individuals on PRC propaganda during October and November of last year. Right? We call them the Taiwan reps in PRC propaganda. So we're able to do this via analyzing thousands and thousands of PRC propaganda videos and look for Taiwanese faces in them. And this is a very interesting project because, first of all, it's a demonstration of how much video and how much computation we are able to do. But also, it's interesting to look at the profiles of these 20 people, right? On the right, these are their credentials. So they're either, you can see on the top 10, they're either former officers, they're former officials, or retired army personnel. So these are the people who are on Taiwanese TV talking about how bad Taiwanese military are, how great the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, are. And their speech is being picked up by PRC propaganda for their own propaganda purposes. And on the bottom 10, you see most politicians. right? You see the vice chair of some parties and the chair of some parties, right? And these are more China-friendly parties here in Taiwan, let's say. Let's not use pro-China for now. For China-friendly political parties in Taiwan. And the PRC propaganda picks their speech up as well to use it for their own good. And our work not just covers the online environment, but also offline activities as well. For example, this is a report that we put out earlier this year about what's called industrial exchange activities across the Taiwan Strait, right? We're able to use data articles actually published by PRC propaganda to compile a list of these so-called exchange activities between Taiwan and China on the location of these events, on the size of these events, and more importantly, on who is participating in these events from both the Taiwan side and the China side, right? So these are all right, and these are all concrete data evidence that these people featured in these reports cannot deny, right? They actually went. So our job is to expose these data of evidence to the Taiwanese public, hopefully to encourage or facilitate a data-driven and evidence-based public discussion about these influence activities and how do we deal with them. All right, finally, I want to close with how IORG sees Taiwan's model for resilience. Right, as Kai-Shun mentioned, we have a variety, a web, so to speak, a web of civil society organizations here back home in Taiwan, dealing or countering with information manipulation, with influence activities, right? And as Kai-Shun also mentioned, this operation, this collective action, let's say, is highly decentralized. It's multi-sector, so it means that there's no central coordination, right? There's only a rough consensus of defending Taiwan, and everyone has different capabilities, different configurations, and moving roughly towards the same direction. For the past couple of years, our government has rather been self-constrained, both in a good sense and in a bad sense, right? In a good sense, also, as Kai-Shun said, they don't want to violate freedom of speech, right? They want the civil society to go ahead first, right? So they have proposed or legislated very limitedly or very targetedly in some of these key aspects about national security and anti-scam. But it also means that our government back in Taiwan rather lacks flexibility and expertise in really to deal with different areas of these challenges. But this might be changing in recent years. So we have to wait and see. But I still want to emphasize on the civil society part, right? I think one sector or not a sector that is less talked about are the motivated citizens in Taiwan, right? These are not people who belong to organizations. These are not people who's academically trained. These are not government hired people. These are just individual people, netizens on the internet, on Facebook, on Threads, on Twitter maybe. They believe that they can make a difference, right? They motivate themselves. They get themselves trained, and they remain vigilant. These are sort of the unsung hero of Taiwanese defense or Taiwanese resilience, right? And you see them every day on the platform, calling out suspicious activities and things like that. And amongst these motivated citizens, there's a group of people who we call civic hackers or civic tech people, right? These are people who create tech tools, just like IORG's tools, to better monitor and evaluate our situation. I'd like to highlight some of these projects, right? As you can see, MyGoPen, which is a fact-check organization and a platform which Kai-Shun mentioned, but other organizations and projects as well in Taiwan. At the center of it, I should say, is GovZero, which is a civic tech or civic hacking community. It's an open community, right? Open source community that allowed a lot of these different projects to to be born over the years. This is much longer than what IRG has lived, back in early the 2010s. So yeah, I'd like to present a bigger picture for you for Taiwan's resilience, and I'll stop here and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yo. Finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Ryohei Suzuki, one of the members of our cybersecurity research team at Sasakawa Peace Foundation. He will be presenting in Japanese the spread of disinformation in Japan and our foundation's efforts. Suzuki-san, please.
はい、皆さんこんにちは。ここからは日本語で少しお話をさせていただきます。私の、お話は日本における、偽情報拡散と当財団の取り組みと題してお話をさせていただきます。はい、それでは簡単に自己紹介から入らせていただきたいんですけれども、現在一橋大学の大学院で博士後期課程の学生をしております鈴木亮平と申します。当財団では、日米安全保障研究ユニットのサイバー関連の事業に、関わらせていただいておりまして、後ほどご紹介をさせていただくような、偽情報関連の取り組みを行っております。また、中曽根平和研究所では、情報空間のリスク研究会に、委員として入らせていただいておりまして、そちらでも活動をしております。関心についてはですね、私自身は、偽情報の、対策というよりも普段はどちらかというと、どういった社会環境があったら、偽情報がより拡散されるかとか、外国のアクターが、日本に、情報発信をするときに、どういった内容の、情報発信をしているかみたいなところに、より強い関心を持っています。博士論文もこれらの関心をメインに、執筆させていただいております。それでは本日ですが、大きく3つに分けてお話をさせていただければなというふうに思います。上から日本における偽情報拡散、日本における偽情報対策、すいません、偽情報に対する当財団の取り組みということで、大きく3つに分けてお話をさせていただきます。はい、まず日本における偽情報拡散から始めさせていただきます。2016年のアメリカ大統領選や、イギリスでの EU 離脱国民投票で、偽情報の拡散というのが大きく注目を集めた一方で、日本では、この問題が注目され始めたのが、比較的最近というかより遅いタイミングでした。こちらのグラフは、日経新聞さんと朝日新聞さんと、読売新聞さんの、オンラインのサイトにて、偽情報の関連記事をカウントしたものです。だいたい2022年頃から、この問題に関する記事が増加していることが分かります。はい、次に、Google トレンドで、同じような角度で、分析というか、注目度を見たっていうグラフなんですけれども、偽情報というキーワードの、検索状況になっています。大体10年ぐらいのスパンを見ているんですけれども、大きく2つのことが分かるかなということで、まずこの問題に対する注目度の上昇は比較的遅かったんですけれども、2016年時点と比較をすると、現在では明らかに大きく上がっていて、2倍から3倍弱ぐらいの注目度になっているというところがまず一つと、もう一つが注目度が高まっているポイントっていうのを見ていくと、左から新型コロナウイルスの感染拡大期、ロシア・ウクライナ戦争、能登半島地震であったり、あとは福島の第一原発から処理水が放出されたタイミングであったり、あとは昨年の地方選挙のタイミングでかなりこの注目が高まっていることが分かります。なお一番左の赤丸なんですけれども、これは2016年に熊本地震でライオンが逃げたっていう偽の投稿があって、その投稿者が逮捕されたタイミングなんですけれども、そこから約4年間ぐらい、そこよりも大きく注目度が上がるような イベントがなかったということを考えると、やはり欧米諸国と比較して政治的な文脈での拡散っていうのがそこまで注目されてこなかったんだろうなということが分かります。はい、で次にこちらの図なんですが、総務省さんの資料から引っ張ってきたものです。偽情報、誤情報に気づかない人が8割を超えていて、約 17% ぐらいの人が、こういったコンテンツを拡散していたというようなことが示されています。このことから、分かることというか、示唆されているのが、私たちの日常の気づかないところで、偽情報っていうのは、すでにかなり拡散をしていて、それに私たちも気づいていない可能性があって、いつの間にか私たちの認識とか認知とかそういったところにネガティブな影響が及んでいる可能性があるということが懸念されるところです。はい、それでは、個別にちょっと事例を見ていこうかなというふうに思うんですが、まず福島第一原発からの処理水放出に伴い、近隣諸国を筆頭に多くの偽情報が拡散しました。こういう画像に、貼り付けているようなものが、結構注目を浴びたかなというふうに思うんですが、葛飾北斎の有名な風景画に手を加えたものや、怪物が放射性物質を口から海に吐いているっていうような、こういった画像とともに、画像がソーシャルメディアにあふれたんですけれども、実際にその情報空間の影響だけにとどまらず、水産物の禁輸であったり、化粧品の不買、また公的機関に対する嫌がらせの電話など実体的な影響につながった点も、インパクトがあったのかなというふうに思います。はい、次に、日本においては従来、自然災害が発生すると偽情報が拡散する、多く拡散するっていう傾向は、指摘されてきたところですが、能登半島地震でも同じくこの傾向が確認されました。内容としては人工地震説であったり、外国人の窃盗団が来ているとか、あとは偽の救助要請であったり、こういった内容のものが、多く拡散したところであります。で、投稿がバズって、ソーシャルメディアから、収益を得るインプレゾンビの存在も、問題視されるとともに、収益構造それ自体が、アテンションエコノミーの問題、につながっていて、問題視されたということも、喚起されました。また、熊本地震の、タイミング、の際に、拡散した偽情報の量と比べて約10倍ぐらい多くの偽情報が拡散していたということも報告されています。なおこの右側の写真については日本で拡散したものではないんですけれども、日本の閣僚が被災地には向かわずにウクライナに行ったっていうような偽の情報が流されまして、これが香港に拠点を置く親中派メディアから拡散されたものです。でより最近のトレンドとして、日本においてもこの、生成 AI に関連した偽情報が増えているというところは、指摘できるかなというふうに思います。左側の写真はトランプ大統領が岸田首相はグローバリストの操り人形だというふうに非難した偽の動画なんですが、この動画は X で100万回以上再生されました。また右側の写真は2023年に拡散した岸田首相に卑猥な発言をさせているような偽の生成 AI 動画なんですけれども、これはかなり速いスピードで200万回以上再生されたということが報告されています。生成 AI が私たちの作業であったり、そういったところの効率に寄与する一方で、諸外国と同様に偽情報の作成にも利用されてしまっているというところが問題になっています。でこれらの個別の事例のほか、海外でかなりローカルなニュースメディアを模倣した偽のニュースサイトが、情報を発信しているということが、選挙の間であったり、通常の期間であったりかなり注目を浴びているんですが、日本でも同じような状況が起こっていまして、これは昨年カナダの研究機関シチズンラボが 中国が世界30カ国で123のローカルなニュースメディアを模倣するネットワークを展開しているということを明らかにしたものです。このうち、スライドに載せているように、日本では15の偽ニュースサイトが展開されているということが明らかになっています。でこれら偽ニュースサイト群の記事を、ちょっと分析した内容を私から、ご紹介させていただきたいんですけれども、日本にとって、重要な要衝である沖縄に関して、どんな、タイトルの記事が発信されているのかっていうのを見てみました。15の偽ニュースサイトのうち複数で発信されている同じタイトルの記事を昨年4月から12月までのタイミングで収集したところ、左側のように22件の記事がヒットしました。で記事数自体はかなり少ないんですけれども、ただそこにちょっと面白いような特徴があって、半数以上がアメリカと関連付けられていることがまず一つで、なおかつ戦争や犯罪などの、ネガティブな文脈で、記事のタイトルが作られていることが多いということが分かりました。で沖縄といえば観光や自然に関するものを、より多く連想すると思うんですけれども、一方で、このサイトでは、アメリカへの懐疑心を煽るような、記事をより多く発信していることから、日米の離反を狙うような、情報発信をしている可能性があるということが指摘されます。で右下の図は、登壇者の一人であるチハオの図なんですけれども、がまとめてくれている米国会議論に関する、類型です。台湾と同じくして、日本においてもこういった米国会議論のナラティブが、拡散されているということの、一つの事例なのかなというふうに捉えています。で次もう一つ、ロシアに関しても少しお話をさせていただこうと思うんですけれども、同様に似たようなことをしていまして、すでに広く報道されていることなんですけれども、左側のプラウダネットワークの日本語版ウェブサイトですねが、情報発信というか記事を大量に拡散していたり、右側あまり日本では認知されていないように思っているんですが、ユーロモアという、ロシアのウェブサイトになっています。このサイトはロシアとウクライナの戦争が始まって以降、欧州から締め出された RT とスプートニクに代わる代替的なメディアとして、一部では新たな情報戦の武器というふうに、称されています。この、右側のウェブサイトなんですけれども、実は右も、下の方に行くと右下の赤丸のような、言語オプションがありまして、42の言語オプションがあるんですけれども、そのうちの一つが日本語になっています。このように日本でも偽情報や影響工作が多数展開されている中、並行して偽情報の対策に関する議論も行われてきました。まずプラットフォーム研究会の最終報告書では、表現の自由の保護の観点から政府の介入は極めて慎重であるべきだというふうに記述がされています。しかしプラットフォーム事業者に依存する自主規制の限界も見え始めておりまして、最近の動向を見ていくと、プラットフォーム事業者に対して削除の申し出を申し出ができるようにするようになる情報流通プラットフォーム対処法が制定されました。しかしコンテンツの削除対象であったり、即日の削除論みたいなところに関しては依然として課題が残っています。でリテラシーであったり人材育成啓発プログラムは、記載の通り、政府であったり民間企業であったり大学であったり、本当に多数のアクターがこういったプログラムを展開しています。でファクトチェック活動についてですが、最近マスメディアの参入が増加傾向にあるなというふうに思っていまして、今回の選挙においてもさまざまなマスメディアがファクトチェックを行うことっていうのを明言していて、メディア間であったり、あとはファクトチェック機関さんとの連携も生まれていて、さまざまなマスメディアが ファクトチェックに力点を置くような流れになっているかなと、ローカル紙も含めてですね、そういう流れになっているかなと思っています。で、技術開発については産学連携による偽情報対策のプラットフォームの構築が昨年話題に上がりました。で、こういった対策における、官民連携についてなんですけれども、例えば教育であったり、啓発の分野では、デジタルポジティブアクションというウェブサイトでの情報集約、発信であったり、インターネットとの向き合い方といった教材作成と発信などで、官民の協力関係が見られています。また、偽情報に対する技術開発であったり研究支援の推進、および研究会やシンポジウムにおける交流、議論への参加などがありますが、官民連携はまだまだ限定的であるというのが現状です。で、偽情報対策に関する議論の中で、表現の自由を確保するっていうのはもちろん大事なことで、そこは逃せないところでも、重要なところではあるんですけれども、同時にこのような状況が生まれていることも、重要かなというふうに思います。例えばある調査によれば、偽情報誤情報対策に誰が取り組むべきかとの質問に対して、政府と回答する日本人が 50% ぐらい上ってまして、で項目別で見ると最多となっています。また日本人の多くはこれまで偽情報対策の責任っていうのは各個人にあるというふうに見る見方が強かったんですけれども、最新の調査では事業者への責任と個人の責任と答える回答者の割合が初めて同数になるっていうようなことが報告されました。偽情報の拡散による状況が悪化する中で、プラットフォームの自主規制に限界が見え始めているっていうことも一因なのかなというふうに感じています。はい、それでは当財団の取り組みに関して、最後に簡単にご説明をさせていただければと思います。まず2022年の2月の出版物になりますが、偽情報対策の必要性を訴える提言書を作成いたしました。偽情報対策を行う情報センターの設置、選挙インフラを重要インフラに指定する、情報操作に対するアクティブサイバーディフェンスの体制の整備、政府と事業者の共同規制の取り組みおよび行動規範の策定の推進、メディアリテラシー教育の拡充などを提言書の軸としてこちらを作成させていただいています。また当財団ではこのような左側のマッピングサイトを運営しておりまして、主にアジア地域を中心として現在では300件を超える偽情報の事例を集約しております。一方でこのマッピングサイトが定期更新ということで、よりタイムリーに情報を共有するために右側の情報専任制ニュースレターというものを今年の4月からホームページで掲載を始めております。このほか当財団の政策提言にも含んでおりますリテラシー教育については若年層を対象としたプログラムを実施しております。以前には古田さんにもお越しいただいたプログラムで情報との向き合い方についてレクチャーをいただきました。本年もこれは実施する予定でして、生成 AI の問題なども含め時勢に合わせてリテラシープログラムを今月末に実施する予定です。それでは最後になりますが、私が思う偽情報対策の課題として3点挙げさせていただきました。まずどのような偽情報対策が日本において、日本の文脈において必要なのかというところで、より多くの実証分析を積み重ねる必要があるんじゃないかなと大前提として感じている次第です。その際にソーシャルメディアへのデータへのアクセスがもうちょっとハードルが低ければなということで感じているんですが、おそらくこの分野の研究であったり分析をしている人の共通課題になっているんじゃないかなと思います。 2つ目が、ソーシャルメディア上で偽情報を収集するメソッドについてで、最近ではかなり操作性の高い、ソーシャルリスニングツールも出てきているんですけれども、それでも偽情報を探すことっていうのはすごく労力が必要で大変な作業になっています。そのため偽情報収集を行う、団体であったり、企業であったりが持つツールであったり知見っていうのを、より広く普及していく必要があるんだろうなというふうに感じています。3つ目には当財団での作業にも直結するところなんですけれども、やはり海外の現地語で発信される偽情報の事例っていうのを収集するのは結構難しいんですが、やはりその国の文化であったりの文脈に沿って重要な事例っていうのはおそらくあるはずで、そういったところについても情報を収集していくことっていうのは重要なんだと感じています。それも含めて、こういったところも含めて、海外で同じような偽情報の収集を行うような団体との連携であったりっていうのを強化して、情報共有を進めていくことが大事なんじゃないかなと感じています。すみません、少し長くなりましたが、ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you, Mrs. Suzuki. We will now take a short break. The symposium will resume at 3:20 p.m. with the panel discussion. I also would like to remind you to send questions to our speakers through the QR code that you have been given. The questions will close soon, so please send them as soon as possible. Welcome back, everyone. I think there might be a few stragglers, but we hope you had a refreshing break. So we will now begin our panel discussion featuring our three speakers with the title Current State and Challenges of Public-Private Collaboration Against Disinformation. And the discussion will be moderated by Mr. Daisuke Furuta, journalist and editor-in-chief of the Japan Fact Check Center, is sitting on the far left for you. With that, I invite our distinguished panelists to share their insights.
はい、皆さん今紹介に預かりました日本ファクトチェックセンター編集長の古田です。日本語の、聴衆の方も多いので、日本側からは日本語で台湾側からは英語で進めていきたいと思います。まず私の方からですね、最初にこの素晴らしいパネリストとのお話の前にですねちょっと議論を日本側からの議論をまとめておきたいと思います。でどういうことかというと、全体状況としてじゃあ日本ではこの偽誤情報対策というものがどうなっているのかということに関してです。で私はこの分野に取り組み始めて10年が経つんですけれども、まず大前提としてこの日本では対策が遅れてきたと言えるのかなと思います。鈴木さんのプレゼンの中にもありましたけれども、なかなか関心が高まってこなかった。世界で言えば、明らかに2016年が分水嶺だった。それはイギリスにおけるブレグジット、そしてアメリカにおける、大統領選挙ですね。でこの時に非常に世界的にこれはデジタル社会共通の問題だということで、ファクトチェック団体も爆発的に増えたし、メディアリテラシー教育や法的な規制の議論が進んだと。ただし日本においてはですね、これがデジタル社会の問題としてではなく、アメリカやイギリスの社会の問題であるというふうな捉えられ方をしてしまった。なのでなかなか関心が高まってこずに、ファクトチェック団体もなかなか生まれてこなかった。というわけで日本においてですね、本当にこの関心が高まり対策が進んだのは2024年、つまり兵庫県知事選だったと言えると思います。その勝査と言えるのがですね、今参議院選挙、これも鈴木さんのプレゼンにありましたが、ファクトチェックをする新聞社が増えました。テレビ局も増えました。これ、今は僕のところでとりあえず暫定的に数えてるんですが、今のペースでいくとおそらくは去年の衆院選の時のファクトチェックの数の3倍以上にはなると思います。それぐらい急増しましたというふうな状況があると。でもう一つ、今日の重要なポイントである官民連携ですね。でこの官民連携に関して言うと、日本は特に限られている、限定されているというふうに感じています。でこれは理由はなぜなのかなんですけれども、まず一つ目の取り組みが遅れたということに関して言うと、実際問題日本では例えばアメリカやイギリスと比べたら確かにこの偽情報や誤情報の影響というものは限られていたんですよね。これ 特に政治的な、偽情報とかに関してはですね、二大政党制で激しく争っている国なので、拡散が目立つ。それに比べると日本は自民党が比較的強い、非常に強いということがあって、それほど拡散してもそれが票数として目に見える形で影響というものはあまり分かってこなかったというものが一つあるのかなと思います。で、次にこのなぜじゃあその官の動きが遅れてきたのかということに、官民連携が遅れてきたのかということに関して言うと、このやはり日本の第二次世界大戦の経験から政府がこの言論空間に乗り出してくることに対する非常に強い警戒感がある。それでも僕は興味深いなと思うのは、日本においてじゃあ官と民どちらの取り組みが早かったかというと、実は官の方が早かった。なぜなら2022年の、国家安全保障戦略ですね、あの中には偽情報対策が明言されている。それに比べるとむしろ民の方が遅れてきた。これはですね、カイシェンさんのプレゼンテーションの中にあった台湾ではむしろこのボトムアップが強くあって、でそこに官も取り組んできたというふうなこの動きでは非常に面白い比較になるのかなと思います。で、僕の方からの全体のまとめはここまでにして、これから第2部のパートのところの、議論に入っていきたいと思うんですけれども、たくさんディスカッションポイントがありますし、皆さんにも今質問をいっぱい送ってきてもらったので、今慌てて僕の方でですねこれを手元でまとめていたんですけれども、皆さんからの質問もですねたくさん来たので、それをいくつかのパートにまとめながら質問をしていきたいなというふうに思っております。すいません、長くなりました。それではここから皆さんに質問をしていきたいんですけれども、この第一のこのディスカッションポイントですね、この官民連携が、これが今の状況で十分と言えるのか、それともよりさらに進化の部分が必要なのかというところをまずは台湾からのお二人にお聞きしたいんですけれども、皆さんからの質問の中でもあったのが、この言論の自由を確保する中でどのように官がこの問題にこの民側と連携してくればいいのか、どうすればこの言論の自由を尊重した形でそれが成し得るのか、この点についてまずはカイシェさん、チハオさん、それぞれにお伺いしたいと思います。
Okay, thank you for the question, Daisuke-san. On the top of everything, it is difficult. It's not an easy thing to say, and there's no one simple answer. I think that gives me more space to talk about this, right? I think before collaboration, what else, or other than collaboration, what else can we do? I think each of the actors or the good actors needs to better prepare themselves. For example, IORG we started to build our own technology since 2019. So it's been 5 years, 6 years. And I think we are just getting started. There's a lot of the work that needs to be done. So that's one, I think, preparing oneself to make each of the actors needs to make themselves more capable. But then collaboration only happens if parties remain an open mind, right? And to be able to share information even without a formal sort of cooperation arrangement. I think in the last section in my slide, I talked about informal partnership. I didn't get the time to talk about informal partnership, but I think that's why a lot of these information sharing partnerships happen in Taiwan, is because through trust, individual trust, for example, maybe A organization and B organization, maybe we cannot have a formal partnership, but then members of each organizations, because they trust each other, they share information. I think that's sort of a good start of collaboration. I should let Kai-Chen talk about this as well.
Thank you very much for the question. And the idea of public-private collaboration is really famous. I mean, Taiwan's defense strategy against FIMI. So that's basically that's kind of, how how the international community understand Taiwanese civil society. So that's fine. But the good thing is, of course, this kind of model is really resilient in the sense that it's very decentralized, right? It's community-driven. But the downside is also its advantage because it's highly decentralized, which means it can be very difficult for these civic associations such as IORG to have enough institutional support, financial resources, to sustain their operation in the future, and which means they have to make a lot of effort to get the resource on their own, and the extent to which the government or what kind of role the government can play become a new question in the future. And also another problem is because we have seen certain new development in FIMI. So for example, if we only focus on disinformation, of course it's very easy to talk about media literacy. It's very easy to talk about fact checking. So we can let this organization to focus on these tasks, right? So they can all play their part. But if you think about it, now we have offline escalation. So disinformation doesn't really just stay online anymore. So we can't really expect this civic organization or this non-governmental organization to undertake that task because they don't really have the human capital to do that. And also because of authority, as you mentioned, because to do that sort of thing, you need to be authorized by the law. To follow the rule of law, you need to get an act passed by the parliament in order to intervene in certain activities, such as to intervene offline escalation, to do investigation. So that's the first trend in FIMI, which make the civil society focus or the community-based model become a little bit ineffective in the future. That's my prediction. Another new trend in FIMI is the fact that a lot of FIMI now operate in AI systems. So we have the exploitation of AI models from China or other authoritarian countries. And you see FIMI not in a sense of disinformation. You see FIMI or you see disinformation or certain distorted messages within the service itself. Then you can't really expect civil society or civil organization to do that because we are talking about a huge capital. We are talking about different technology to detect problems in AI system. So we need a lot of money. Another new trend is many of the data trained for AI are poisoned. As one of our speakers has mentioned, Provoda example, you got lots of fraud articles. So that's a different way. So that's become a new way of using AI development to operate FIMI. Also, I think that's also something civil society doesn't have the capacity to deal with. Does that make sense? Yeah.
ありがとうございます。鈴木さんも絶対質問があるだろうから、もし入ってきた方はどんどん入ってきてもらいたいんですけれども、ちょっと今いろんなキーワードで出てきたと思うんですよね。フィミであるとか、じゃあ AI モデルの話であるとか、ただそっちに移る前にもう少しだけですね、この官民連携のところで話をしたいんですけれども、お二人が言ってくれたポイント、チハウが言ってくれたような、個人間の信頼に基づいての協力、特に情報のシェアとかに関しては、私もその台湾に行くたびにすごくみんなで飲み会に行って、みんなでいろんな情報を飲み会の場でもシェアができるみたいな、ああいった環境というのは本当台湾のすごく大きな魅力だなと思うんですけれども、官からのサポートということで、じゃあこれも皆さんからの質問の中に入っていたんですけれども、直接的な法的な規制であるとかですね、自身で政府自体がファクトチェックに乗り出すであるとか、もしくは経済的予算面で支援するっていう、この3つが大きくあるかと思うんですけれども、日本ではですね、その3つどれもですね、やっぱりそれはやるべきではないんではないのかという議論があります。いずれもやっぱり、強度が強いもので、その自らファクトチェックに乗り出すのは本当に言論統制につながりかねないというものであったりで、法的な規制も言論環境に影響を与えうる。で、3つ、予算もですね、予算を持ってコントロールするのではないかというふうな議論もあります。その点についてはお二人はどのようにお考えでしょう。
Okay. So I think I want to provide a different angle to look at this question, because we are really obsessed with the idea of disinformation, right? So, and I also talk about disinformation because I think that's something people, policymakers understand. So, but in that context, you have to deal with another competing idea such as misinformation or malinformation. So we got a set of similar ideas like disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation. But I think I just mentioned because policymakers understand it, so I use it. But I'm not really happy with that concept. But the reason is that I think we need to kind of forget about disinformation altogether and start to talk about information manipulation. And the reason is that because if you focus on disinformation too much, I think, and the consequences can be very misguided because you will put too much emphasis on the true or false of a particular piece of information. But think about it, many of the information manipulation actually use, or they are based on facts. Think about the example, Zhihao just mentioned the depreciation of Japanese yen. That's the fact, right? But if you use that fact to achieve certain goal, then that's a different story. That's not part of it. That's not going to be disinformation. That become information manipulation. So that's the first point. So let me just turn to, based on this, let me turn to the debate about free speech. So if we still stick with the idea of disinformation, then we have to deal with free speech. And we need to ask two questions. Is disinformation speech? That's for sure, right? So disinformation is it's a kind of expression, is a part of speech. So we will ask question if this kind of disinformation should be protected. So that's the first layer of question. But if you change the angle, if you change your perspective to think about information manipulation or think about FIMI, then you will have a sense of, you get a kind of sense that maybe this debate itself is manipulated. You know what I mean? Because we are talking, because I think in one of our reports we argue that's the kind of debate the attacker or the operator want you to get involved. Because in that sense, the debate about free speech in the context of FIMI is almost like a trap. You know, because you can see an illiberal country export very problematic information into democratic system. Then when the government tried to intervene, that sort of operation, then the government got attacked. So that itself is kind of a gray zone tactic. So if we now talk about, if we use the idea of information manipulation, then we can try to look at or try to think about the much wider process of defamation campaign itself. Then we turn to look at tactics. We tend to look at techniques, then we look at procedures that involve in a particular set of events. Thank you.
これは本当に難しい問題で、私たちはその民主主義社会で言論の自由を大切にしないといけない、そして言論の自由を大切にしないといけないという原則に固執するほどフィミに対して言論操作に対して弱体化してしまうという、ここは本当にパラドックスだと思うんですけれども、どうでしょう、シハオから見たらその官はそこでどのような役割を果たせるのか。
Well, I think the core issue is still building trust. That sounds very lazy, but it's really not. No matter if it's speech or if it's behavior, right? No matter if it's content that is true or not true, or behavior which is authentic or not authentic, right? It ultimately, at this day and age, first of all, this is maybe the first time in human history that so many people have so much access to information and systems of communications so that anyone can literally talk to anyone. Sorry, not literally, but almost possible. So I think if we think about this, maybe this warrants a bit of a chaos in our systems, in our societies right now, because we're not used to this as a species, I guess. But that gives more power to the individual, right? And that gives more trouble to the institutions, which is actually a good idea 10 years ago or 20 years ago, when authorities and institutions were so strong that individual opinions or differences have less space, right? That was the time where we encouraged ideas like direct democracy or peer-to-peer collaboration, things like that. But now things have sort of shifted or even flipped, right? Now individual civil society organizations are talking about the trust towards institutions, which is really interesting. As someone who grew up with the internet, are familiar with the idea of decentralization, of peer-to-peer power, of grassroots movements. So all that given said, no matter if it's government funding, let's say public news, right? Public funded news or public funded research, or making laws to outlaw certain malign behavior. All of these things needs public support now more than ever. So that leads to the final point, is to present the evidence to the public, to demystify all of these things, right? Because if we're only talking about content, because well, of course everyone has their own beliefs to think about if certain content is true or not. If we're talking about influence operations or covert operations, these things are even more in secret and kind of crazy for the regular citizens. So if we want regular citizens to support government intervention to regulate some of these activities and to outlaw more serious activities, we need to convince most of the society that this threat is real, it's actually happening, it's already caused harm. Right? So that means presenting the evidence of not just what happened, but also what damage has been done to the society, to the entire society. And you cannot just publish it on some kind of obscure government website, right? You need to launch public communications campaigns or strategic communication campaigns so that more public opinion is on the side of this, and then more, not just blindly supporting government regulating things, but participating in that policy debate, participating in that policy conversation about how do we collectively as society regulate and protect our own systems and institutions and fundamentally personal liberties.
非常に面白いですよね。政策決定の中にもその市民の声がこう入っていく。でそれでよりこう開かれたコミュニケーションの中でのレギュレーションであれば、そういったものも支えられるのではないかという議論っていうのは非常にやっぱ台湾らしい議論だなと思います。鈴木さんから見てですね、この日本にいて見ている中でこの官民連携はどのように進んでいくべきだと考えているでしょうか。
はい、日本においては、やはり表現の自由の、保護っていう観点がやはり強いので、どうしても慎重に、ならざるを得ないところが、あると思います。で、古田さんが冒頭お話ししてくださったように、やっぱり戦後からのそういった記憶もありますし、なかなかそこが障壁って言ったらあれかもしれないんですけれども、官民連携が少なくとも、妨げられている一因にはなっていると思います。ただ私がプレゼンの中でお話しさせていただいた教育教材の、に関する官民連携とかって、古田さんも、ご協力されているところだと思うんですけれども、私はなんかそういうなんていうんですかね、ちょっとこう政治から距離感があるようなところで、まずは協力を進めていくっていうのは大事なのかなというふうに思っていて、どうしても政府のファクトチェックにしても政府からの資金援助にしてもどうしてもそれが政治的な文脈に位置づけられてしまうっていうのが問題だと思いますので、それとはちょっと遠いところから実際そのリテラシー教育大事なんで、そういったところから入っていくっていうのはいいことなのかなというふうに思います。で、加えて今チーハオが信頼の話してくれていましたけども、やっぱりそのもし官民連携をもっともっと進めるにしても、大事なのはやはり、透明性と説明責任と、あとは、市民社会というかマスメディアというか、そこはあれなんですけれども、第三機関のやっぱり監視だと思うので、そのあたりも含めて、中身の透明性を上げていくっていうところと、それを通じて、信頼関係作っていくっていうことが、重要なんじゃないか、あくまで独立してますよっていうところですね。はい、すいません、私からの意見は以上です。
ありがとうございます。次のパートにちょっと移っていきたいんですけれども、このディスカッションの中でですね、他にも話していきたいところ、皆さんからの質問の中にも多くあったそのフィミーの部分であるとか、政府の関わりの部分であるとか、あと AI のところにちょっと話を移していきたいと思います。で、これも質問の中にありました。チハオの、プレゼンテーションの中でソーシャルメディアプラットフォームによって使われ方が違う。でそれによって親中国のプロパガンダの広がり方も違うというふうな話がありましたが、これ AI モデルでも同じようなことが起こるのではないでしょうか。でそのような研究はどういうふうに進んでいるんでしょうかという質問が来てたんですけれども。
Are you talking about the differences of AI in, let's say, the US or Europe versus?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. I think there's less apparent things and there's more apparent things. Because China is such an opaque country, I think we're not really sure, collectively outside of China, not really sure what is actually happening in China in terms of AI. I think Kaishan has more expertise to talk about this than I do. We're researching information manipulation, but I can some things highlights, some things gets my attention. First of all, China is engaged in a national data collection effort since I don't know how many decades ago. And now they have data exchange centers established all around the country to facilitate so-called, AI development with aligning with the core socialist value, let's say. Who knows what that means? That's inside China. Outside China, they have TikTok and other tools collecting other people's information. Not just on social media, but surveillance technology, right? They're exporting that. And the data that's collected and funneled inside China to train their AI models, it sounds very scary to me, at least. I'm not so sure if their AI models are trained from the beginning with these censorship regimes installed. At least not DeepSeek. Right, it's censored afterwards. Let's say, if you download if you download the publicly available models of DeepSeek and you run it locally without network access, you get very similar answers to Western models. And I think that points to the way they trained quote their model, but on the web of services, it censors itself. Right. So that's a very apparent thing, and this is worrying. Also, this is a little tricky to think about because they're essentially China, by making DeepSeek publicly available, is what's available, what's convenient, has the most impact in contemporary society, right? And that coupled with the narrative now that, or maybe some actuality that now currently the U.S. government isn't so liberal about a lot of things, and even some of the Americans are looking for alternatives, and that is a dangerous combination to at least to my mind.
So a couple of weeks ago, I just published an article titled "What Democracy Get Wrong About Chinese AI," and and the reason why the reason that motivated me to write that article because I had a conference a couple of weeks ago in Europe, and I think they are really because I got a very mixture of emotion because some policymakers, some Western policymakers felt Chinese AI is super advanced. China is AI number 2 in the world. But there are also some rather skeptical policymakers who actually think China will never win over the United States because the United States is the AI number 1. So that kind of mixture of conflicting emotions just kind of inspired me. And But I think for many small, medium-sized democracies, this kind of argument is late and unnecessary because for small country like Taiwan or Japan or France or a lot of European countries, it's almost impossible to compete with Chinese in AI, in model composition. So in that sense, model composition for these countries is a distraction because if you put too much resources there, then you are gonna try to win a game you will never win, you know. And it also late because China's AI is always quite advanced. It's not number two, but it's not number one. But number two is still strong enough. So that's my basic argument. So I identify 4 potential global risks associated with Chinese AI. The first risk is, of course, still censorship because we run a set of experiments, and we did find Chinese AI models tend to refuse to answer sensitive questions. So that's for sure. And the second risk is data protection and privacy. If you use a local model, that's fine. But if you use their services, and I mean a lot of services that are not labeled as Chinese AI, but you know they are. Anyway, so yeah. So if for example, to give you a tip, if you want to test a certain solution your company use is Chinese or not, just try to ask them sensitive questions. And if they kind of like refuse to engage with you, then that's kind of a red flag. So the second risk is data protection and privacy, because a lot of people still talk about data and protection in the context of collecting data, you know, before AI. But now, if in the era of AI, data collection means they get the data through the interaction with you. So that's the second risk I want to mention. The third risk is industrial composition, because Chinese AI is rather competitive in terms of its price, and the performance is not amazing. But the thing is, you don't really need to have cutting-edge models to perform a lot of public or office work. You just need to have a reasonable model to provide you stable services. So that's the third risk, because this kind of Chinese AI services will, you know, for example, in Taiwan, because we also share quite similar language, and it becomes super difficult for Chinese companies to develop competitive models against them. And finally, the cultural alignment, you know, because a Chinese model, of course, are trained based on Chinese data. And this data, as I just mentioned in my presentation, many of these data are filtered and sanitized. So, and also they tend to reflect Chinese government's values and their government styles. So that's the basic fourth risk I highlight. And if you are interested, you can try to Google my article. Thank you very much.
本当にこの AI モデルでこのセンサーシップなど今4つの脅威を挙げていただきましたけれども、まあ本当に恐ろしいと同時に、じゃあそこでじゃあ AI モデルでじゃあ我々がその競争できるのかっていうまず根本的な問題もあるということで、これはもう本当にそのフィミンにも限らず、もうすべての分野においてまあ非常に重要なポイントなのかなと思います。次の最後にですね、皆さんに一言ずつ話してもらおうと思うんですけど、そのポイントはですね、じゃあ我々はこの民主主義社会というものをきちんと維持しつつ、こういう偽情報であったりフィミンに対してどのようなその効果的な対策を取れるのか、そのために例えば日台連携とかどういう可能性があるのかという質問を皆さんにしたいんですけれども、その前にもう一つ、これも皆さんからも質問が寄せられてたし、私もぜひ聞きたいところなんですけれども、こういうフィミンや偽情報の対策に関してですね、時の政権が自分たちにとってそれがその対策をすることがプラスになるのであれば、その政権は対策に積極的になる。そうではないときは対策に積極的にならない。こういったことが各国で見られます。例えば韓国、ユン政権の時にファクトチェック団体が次々と潰れました。そしてアメリカ、トランプ大統領の登場によって今ファクトチェック団体はかなり窮地に追い込まれています。台湾も同じようなことが起こるのではないでしょうか。この後2人に答えてもらった後、鈴木さんからも質問してもらおうと思います。もうコメントもしてもらおうと思います。ぜひ プラスでお願いします。鈴木さんからも同じもし追加でそのポイントでこれも聞きたいというところがあれば。
ちょっと違うポイントにもなってしまうかもしれないんですけれども、そのファクトチェック団体がその政治的なその政権の向きでちょっとこう影響を受けたりとかっていうのもあると思うんですけれども、ファクトチェックに関連して、例えばそのファクトチェックってこの偽情報に対するレジリエンスを作る上ですごく重要な活動だと思います。ただ実際そこに到達する人と到達しない人って結構その違いがあると思っていて、台湾では何かそのファクトチェックされた情報にこう人々がよりこう到達するようなアウトリーチ、そういった形での何かしらのアウトリーチの工夫みたいなものがあれば、ぜひ教えていただければなと思います。
I think within the framework of this information, I think fact-checking is still very important, right? And I also think, as I just mentioned, the Taiwan Fact Check Center is internationally certified. And the reason why it is certified is because that organization has nothing to do with the government. Because if any government, if any fact-checking organization cooperate with government, then it won't get internationally certified. So that's the policy in the global fact-checking community. I think you can probably just add on that as well. So that's the first thing. So in this context, I think that the role of the government is really tricky, because this organization won't be able to get enough resources. They don't even get controversial cases, not many. So in Taiwan's experience, many of the reports this organization did was based on volunteers. Certain netizens just report certain piece of information and ask this organization to verify if this information is correct or false. So that's how it works. So maybe I can let Zhihao to explain a little bit, because, for example, what kind of role the government should play in this context. Right, but before you answer, I just want to add one more thing. I think you probably meant, because the translation is not very clear to me, but you mentioned what kind of advice we can give to the Japanese government or Japanese society, right? Did you mention that?
そうこういう情報に関してフィミとかである社会を不安定にしようとするときに、別にその不安定のなり方が必ずしもその時の政府や与党にとってマイナスにならないこともある。でそういった場合においては、その政府は別に積極的に対策を取ろうという形にならない。アメリカのトランプ政権がなぜこれだけその偽情報対策に対して後ろ向き、規制に対して後ろ向きなのかというと、今のネット上の言論が自分たちにとってそれほどマイナスにならないからということがあるわけで、じゃあ同じようなことが台湾で現政権は対策に官民連携で取り組もうとしていても、次の政権になった時もそれが確保されるとかで、そういった場合において官民連携が安定的に続けられるっていうのはどういう状況なのかということがぜひ伺いたいなと。
Okay, couple of things. One, outreach, right, from Suzuki-san, and then two, about Japan-Taiwan cooperation from Daisuke-san, and also about regime change, right, about sustainability, basically. Okay, so outreach from fact-checking organizations, and also from organizations like IORG or DSET, right? How do we get our content across to the individual that we want in their hands? Basically, it's very hard, right? Nowadays, everyone knows it's very hard. So that's the baseline. So we can only do good things by our own. For example, as Kai-chun was saying, fact check center needs to keep a safe distance from the government. So do we. Otherwise, people won't have enough trust for us. Not to say that we're not talking to the government or with the government. It's just that we need to stay a safe distance from the government or any authorities, right? We need to operate independently. I just want to point out one aspect of this outreach is actually physical outreach. It's like this thing, right? This event that we're doing is directly talking to individuals with your faces and looking at us, and we look at you. It doesn't have to be very prestigious. It can just be in a community center. It can just be under a tree in a neighborhood. I think a lot of the organizations in Taiwan in the past 6 or 7 years have been doing that, right? Not just on fact-checking, not just on talking about influence, but also about improving how people communicate and talk about politics. For example, in 2019, we have a lot of different groups in Taiwan just on the street, friendly approaching other people and asking them about difficult political questions, right? And these groups have internal training sessions for their members to how to engage friendly in talking about difficult issues, not just politics, but any difficult issues, right? Like income inequality, for example, or housing justice. So it is really about softer approaches a lot of these times. But for us, we do community workshops as well. We do community outreach as well. And maybe most importantly, we work with middle school and high school teachers for them to deliver our research to their students in a way that they see appropriate, right? So that's outreach. Physical connections, I think that's the most important thing. So for Japan-Taiwan cooperation, of course. Okay, regime change first. It's difficult, again, everything is difficult, because we want, as civil society, I think, our role is to do things when the government cannot yet, right? When institutions cannot do it yet. But the goal is to have the institutions do it and be trusted by the public so the civil society does not have to do it forever, because that would be kind of crazy, right? And as Kai-chun said, a lot of the things the civil society groups cannot do. So that institutionalization is the way to deal or counter at least a little bit for regime change, right? But then it is also a vulnerability because a government can cancel institutions. So it's a tricky balance that civil society and institutionalized efforts needs to be in a society at the same time, so that no matter which side changes, the countering force is always there, right? Of course, we are all worried, and I think in Taiwan, there's always the voice of not give too much power to the government, just in case the authoritarian people gets into power, which is an actual threat. I think in all of the countries right now we see. So that is painfully aware. Sort of everyone is aware of that.
すみません、なんか時間があと5分しかなくなったので、もし今のポイントに少し会社員が付け加えたかったら付け加えて、でその後じゃあ最後にこの民主主義社会を維持してどうやって守っていくかを1分ずつ皆さんに最後語ってもらおうと思うんですけど、もし会社員 if you want to add something for this regime change topic.
I think the best way of doing it is really to legalize certain cooperation, so to sort of legalize certain very effective forms of public-private collaboration in Taiwan. For example, I think the cooperation in the areas of fact-checking is quite effective. Also in the analysis of FIMI, also quite effective. And that maybe the government can try to cooperate with this organization and try to legalize this cooperation in the future. But the risk of regime change is always there. I think that happened. I think that happened in real democratic countries, And that's the price I think democracies have to pay for it. And we can only hope the civil society or the quality of Taiwanese citizens won't really vote for the wrong person or for the wrong government. Yeah.
ありがとうございます。それでは最後にじゃあこの状況をどのように改善していくかについて一言ずつ皆さんに話してもらおうと思います。鈴木さんから。
はい、今日いろいろとこの官民連携も含めて、偽情報に対するどういった今後発展ができるかみたいなところも含めてだと思うんですけれども、お話をさせていただいて、やはり台湾と違って日本はなんか幸いこういう外国からの干渉とかがあんまり大きくは見られてこなかったのは幸いではあるのかなと思いつつ、やっぱりこの状況に甘んじてはいけない、何かが起こってからではいけないようなところもあるんだろうなと思います。でやっぱり今チハオからもお二人からも市民社会の力とかっていうのは出たんですけど、やっぱりそこも含めて、社会全体でっていうのと、もう一つは政府の中でもしっかりとそのホール・オブ・ガバメントのアプローチみたいなところをしっかりとその連携をとって、情報共有の体制を作りながら、国民との対話の中でこういった偽情報の対策というのを進めていく必要があるんだろうなと思います。以上です。
ありがとうございます。じゃあ。
I'll just be very short. I'm very glad that we are able to be here together to share information, to raise more questions. I hope that this partnership and this information sharing continue between Japan and Taiwan. I wholeheartedly hope that. In terms of technical cooperation, IORG's data set also covers Japanese. We've provided data to JFC for some fact-checking efforts. So we hope that if anyone doing research in Japan is interested, please email us. Thank you.
As Jeremy just introduced our organization earlier today, our DSET is really committed to the area of information security, and now we do play a very different role, different from IORG. And our goal is really to have some sort of policy suggestion for our government. Also can provide some Taiwanese examples in the area of disinformation campaign and to try to find certain international resonance in the future. So, well, thank you very much for this event, and I also look forward further cooperation in the future.
ありがとうございます。この偽情報に関する関心はどんどん高まってきてますけれども、フィミが語られること、日本ではまだまだ少ないので、こういった機会をさらに広げていければと思います。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
Thank you to our panelists and our moderator for the insightful discussion. I would like to invite the panelists to return to their seats. Maybe we can, yes, give them another big round of applause. Next, to provide a concluding perspective on today's event, I would like to invite Mr. Junosawa, Senior Fellow at Sasakawa Peace Foundation, to share his reflections.
日体の大変充実した議論をいただきました。総括コメントということでお話をさせていただければと思います。本日のシンポジウムのテーマである外国からの影響工作、外国ではフィミというふうに呼んでますが、日本では情報戦、認知戦という方が馴染みがあるかもしれません。偽情報を流して社会に混乱を起こし、時に相手を弱体化させて最終的に意思決定に影響を与える、これが影響工作の目的になりますが、これは旧ソ連のお家芸とされてきました。でそのルーツはですね、1920年代まで遡るというふうに言われています。背景にはですね、日露戦争において、日本陸軍の明石大佐が行った、ロシアのロマノフ王朝を弱体化させる影響工作、これがソ連の誕生につながったからだという意見もあります。また技術的にはですね、19世紀の終わりにですね、輪転印刷機とかオフセット印刷が発明されまして、それによって大量印刷が可能になってですね、 情報を大量に配布する、拡散することが可能になったと。さらにはラジオとか映画というメディアの登場がですね、この時代に影響工作が生まれた背景というふうに言われております。さて、我々が生きる21世紀の今日、インターネットやデジタル技術が普及して、個々人がですね、スマホを持つようになりました。情報の伝達は100年前に比べてですね、格段に向上しています。この偽情報が社会に蔓延する、これ印刷の時代はですね、数週間かかりましたけれども、今数時間で拡散をしてしまいます。そして今日も議論にあったようにですね、生成 AI の発展、これにより偽情報を作る方の技術も進歩してきています。本物と差損のない偽物の動画や音声、画像、テキストがごく短時間で大量に生成できるようになりました。で、攻撃がこのような技術を駆使してですね、専門用語ではマルチモーダルというふうに言いますけれども、テキストだけではなくて動画や音声も含めてですね、複数の形式を組み合わせて、情報戦を行うようになってきています。で、この10年のデジタル時代の情報戦の歴史の中でもですね、この情報戦、偽情報、ディスインフォメーションに関して急速な質の向上と量の拡大が起きていることが分かります。今日議論にありましたように、国際社会で情報戦が注目されましたのは2016年の英国の EU 離脱の国民投票と米国大統領選挙になりますけれども、この時代はですね、ロシアの情報機関、10年前はですね、人力で24時間ツイッターに書き込みをしておりました。ところが現在、昨年からですね、言われておりますのは、もうすでに生成 AI を使って24時間絶え間なく自動生成で偽情報を流しているということになります。で、このソ連のお家の影響工作、これロシアに引き継がれましたけれども、今はこれをですね、中国が真似始めております。昨年本年の6月にですね、オープン AI がチャット GPT の不正利用に関するレポートを出しましたけれども、ここでも中国の情報機関の不正利用が指摘をされております。本日議論にありましたように、ユウさんのご発表では、中国が民主主義の正当性を弱体化させる目的で、この米不足とかですね、台湾における電力不足を煽っているというご指摘がありました。ファンさんからは、この動画プラットフォームの TikTok がですね、若者に対してアルゴリズム分析を使って影響力工作を行っていると。それによってですね、TikTok のユーザーが親中な傾向を示すということが指摘をされています。鈴木さんの発表では、実際のですね、偽動画とか偽ニュースサイト、こういったものが、実例を紹介をしていただいております。で、参加者の皆さんもですね、民主主義国である日本、台湾、この市民がですね、中国からの影響工作にさらされているという現実を目の当たりにされたのではないかというふうに思っております。で、このようなデジタル社会、デジタル時代の中国からの影響工作に対してですね、我々日体が連携をして対応していかなきゃいけないと、そういう点では本日のシンポジウムはその一歩として大変充実した議論になったと思います。で、この影響工作に対抗するためにですけれども、今回台湾からの皆さんの議論を聞いていてですね、やはり我々一人一人がフロントラインにいる、前線に立っているということだろうというふうに思います。日本では政策課題とかですね、安全保障上の問題、国がすべての責任を負えという声が大きくなりがちですけれども、台湾はこの偽情報の問題、影響工作の問題にですね、市民の一人一人がファクトチェックに参加するというボトムアップのアプローチで行っているというご指摘が本日ありました。このことは我々もですね、深く胸に刻んで、今日これから会場を出られるとですね、スマホを見られて情報を収集されると思いますけれども、皆さん、今日ご参加の皆さん一人一人が実はこの情報戦の時代、影響工作のですね、フロントラインに立たれていると、そういう認識を抱いていただければ、本日のシンポジウムの意味があったかなというふうに思っております。本日はどうもありがとうございました。
Mr. Osawa. And finally, to close today's event, I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Susumi Yoshida, Senior Executive Director of the Safer Internet Association.
皆様、本日はシンポジウムに最後までご参加くださりまして誠にありがとうございました。デジタル空間は想像を超える速さで変化し、生成 AI やアルゴリズムが情報の流通や受け止め方に着実な影響を及ぼしています。台湾の取り組みが示すように、市民社会の創意と俊敏さは大きな強みでございますけれども、日本ではこうした民間の力を長期的かつ広範に生かすための仕組み作りが、これからの重要な課題となっているかと思います。現在進行中の参議院議員選挙を含め、社会的関心の高い出来事の周辺では、偽情報が注目を集めやすい状況が続いています。このような環境で官民連携を進めるためには、表現の自由を守りながら、透明性を担保する手続きを組み込んだ丁寧な制度づくりが、官民連携対策を持続的かつ確かなものにする鍵だというふうに考えます。本日交わされた多様な知見と経験が、この制度設計をめぐる議論をさらに深め、今後各所で実りある検討へとつながることを期待しております。最後に、遠慮よりご参加いただき、貴重な知見を共有してくださいました台湾 DSET、IORG の皆様、また素晴らしい会議場のご提供を含めご支援くださいました笹川平和財団の皆様に心より感謝申し上げます。そしてご登壇ご参加いただきましたすべての皆様にも重ねて御礼申し上げます。本日は誠にありがとうございました。
Thank you, Mr. Yoshida. And I would also like once again to thank all our guests and speakers for today's event.